I know this is going to make me look like the bad guy, but I need to tell the truth. If you read the title and already think I'm cruel, maybe you're right, but at least hear me out before you decide. Everyone tells you to never speak badly about your ex, but sometimes silence feels like you're still trapped in their rules. And I've lived long enough in her rules. When I first met her, she looked like the kind of woman who could walk into any room and make it hers. Beautiful, sharp, quick with words, the kind of sharp that makes you laugh at first and bleed later. She smiled at me like she'd already decided I was going to be hers. At the time, I thought that was confidence. I didn't realize it was ownership. From the beginning, she controlled the narrative. She didn't ask me out, she informed me, "We're going out Friday. Pick me up at 8. Don't be late." It felt bold, refreshing, like she knew what she wanted. I told myself that meant strength. Now I know it meant she didn't care what I wanted. The first red flag should have been how she joked. Every compliment had a blade hidden in it. She'd tell me, "You're dependable," kind of like a golden retriever, then laugh like it was sweet. If I looked offended, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Relax, I'm joking. Don't be so sensitive." That phrase, "don't be so sensitive," became her favorite shield. No matter how deep the cut, if I reacted, I was the problem. Money got weird fast. On our third date, she made a big deal about leaving her wallet at home. When I paid, she didn't say thanks, she just looked at me and said, "See? That's how a real man should be." If I hesitated later, even once, she'd say I was cheap and post some passive-aggressive story about men who can't provide. I ended up paying for everything, dinners, drinks, even an online course she said was essential for her career. When I questioned it, she snapped that I didn't believe in her. So I swiped my card and kept quiet. Her friends loved her. She made sure of it. Out in public, she was radiant, laughing at my jokes, touching my arm, making us look like the perfect couple. People envied me. But the second the door closed, she'd tear me down for trying too hard or embarrassing her. I started dreading the ride home after every social event because I knew the performance would end and the knives would come out. She compared me to her exes constantly. My ex used to surprise me with weekend trips. My ex never complained about paying. My ex had better taste in clothes. She'd drop those lines casually, then watch me, waiting for the reaction. If I stayed silent, she called me boring. If I defended myself, she called me insecure. Either way, she won. And still, I stayed. Because every once in a while, she'd give me a glimpse of softness, her head on my chest while she asked about my childhood, or a random text saying she missed my voice. Those crumbs kept me hooked, convinced me the storm had a calm center I just had to fight toward. But the truth is, the softness was bait. The storm was the reality. The moment that opened my eyes came when I got sick. Fever, body shaking, couldn't get out of bed. I asked if she could stop by, maybe bring soup. She laughed on the phone and said, "You're not dying, stop being pathetic." An hour later, I saw her post a photo at a club, captioned, "Never waste a night staying in." I was lying in bed sweating through my sheets, and she was out making sure strangers knew how independent she was. That was the first time I felt something break in me, not my heart, but the illusion I'd been clinging to. I didn't leave then. I should have. Instead, I told myself she was complicated, misunderstood, too fiery for normal men. But deep down, I knew the truth, she wasn't misunderstood. She was exactly who she showed me she was. I just didn't want to believe it. That's where the story really begins. I tried to be clever about it this time, to treat the relationship like a science experiment where I could track patterns and stop pretending red flags were fireworks. For a few days it even looked like progress. She came back soft and attentive, with good mornings that sounded almost human and late-night calls where she asked about my day and actually let me finish sentences. She brought over groceries and cooked at my place, hummed some song while stirring sauce, kissed me on the cheek like we were normal. I caught myself thinking maybe I'd exaggerated, maybe stress had warped my memory, maybe love really did just look messy up close. That thought didn't last long. The first slip was small, the kind you'd excuse if you wanted to. We went out with her friends and she retold a story I'd shared in confidence, the one about my dad missing a school event and how I'd learned to stop expecting big gestures. She turned it into a punchline about me being low maintenance and everyone laughed. Under the table she squeezed my knee like I was part of the bit. On the way home I said I didn't like it. She grinned and said, "Relax, it's content." I asked when our life became something to feed her audience. She said it always had been, I just hadn't noticed. Money came back dressed up as romance. She sent me a link to a weekend escape, new hotel with rooftop baths and a view so clean it felt fake. She wrote, "We deserve magic." I said work was tight. She said, "It's not the price, it's the priority," then went quiet in a heavy way that made the room tilt. I booked it. At check-in she filmed us, whispered power couple into her camera, and posted before the elevator hit our floor. That night she lay on the bed reading comments about us while I stared at the ceiling and did the math I wasn't supposed to do. On the drive home she asked if I felt closer after investing in our future. I nodded and wanted to open the door and walk beside the car to cool my head. She controlled time like it was a test. If I stayed late at work, I was distant. If I left early for her, I was clingy. If I replied fast, I had no life. If I replied slow, I didn't care. It didn't matter what I did, she could flip the coin and call it a failure. I started editing myself in small ways that embarrassed me later. Deleting periods because she said they made me sound cold. Swapping words so I sounded warmer. Adding an emoji like a peace offering. She didn't need a leash. I made one for her and wore it proudly as being a good partner. She compared me with ghosts I couldn't prove existed. My ex surprised me with flights just because. My ex would never question who I hang out with at midnight, secure men don't. My ex didn't count favors. Each sentence was half myth and half dare. If I said nothing, she called me boring. If I pushed back, she called me insecure. Either way, she got a reaction, which is what she wanted. She wasn't measuring me against other men. She was measuring how much of myself I'd trade to win a round she never planned to score honestly. Publicly, she was sugar again. She hugged me in front of people, kissed me in photos, told her followers I was her calm. I watched strangers ship us like we were characters on a show and hated how good that approval felt in my chest. In private, she removed little blocks from the base of me until I wobbled. "You're dependable," she'd say in a tone that made dependable sound like something you apologize for. "You're not a risk taker," she'd add, like it was diagnosis, not preference. When I told her about a small win at work, she smiled the way people smile at a child showing a drawing and said, "You act like you cured something." I laughed along because arguing would turn into a lecture about ambition. Later, alone, the sentence stung more than anything she'd shouted. She started workshopping our problems in rooms I didn't enter. A mutual mentioned she'd been so vulnerable lately talking about being with a man who fears powerful women. I recognized the phrasing from her captions. It's surreal hearing a summary of your relationship from someone who only knows you as a composite of her stories. I wanted to show screenshots, timestamps, a map with pins. Instead I said, "That's not what's happening," and watched the disappointment cross their face, because I didn't give them a scene. The triangulation began as a name she dropped in passing. A guy in her creative circle who was obsessed with the grind, who gets it, who doesn't nitpick. I said good for him and tried to mean it. Soon she was busy most evenings for collabs. She'd vanish, then reappear bubbling with praise for the work they did together. Once she posted a glass across from a man's wrist and let people guess. My phone lit up with tags and DMs. I didn't respond. At 1 in the morning she texted, "Jealous?" I said, "No, tired." She replied, "Boring answer." In the morning she accused me of being emotionally absent. I heard the pattern click: light the fire, film the smoke, blame me for coughing. The worst night wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday. I had a presentation early the next day, told her I needed quiet. She arrived with wine and a camera grip, said we should record a raw talk about how couples handle stress. I said no. She pouted and sat on the counter like a judge. "You just don't understand my work," she said. I put her phone in a drawer. She took it back and posted a black screen about men who silence your voice. I rehearsed my slides with that sentence glowing in my head like a neon sign. In the morning I did the presentation fine and came home to a story titled "Doing It Alone" with a photo of her holding a mug I bought. I deleted Instagram from my phone and felt the ghost vibration of it for days. She proposed a reset. Not an apology, never an apology. A concept. A cabin for a weekend, bad reception, fresh air. She said we could start over, privately. Then she mentioned she'd teased the trip to her audience and they were rooting for us, so backing out would be dishonest. I stared at her and understood, finally, that even privacy had to be pre-approved by strangers. I said I wasn't going. She blinked, tilted her chin, and let tears gather without falling, the kind of tears that photograph will. "You're abandoning me in my healing," she whispered, and for a second the old reflex fired. I wanted to fix it, to hold her, to be the better man in a script that never ended. I didn't move. She left the house with my spare key in her hand like a trophy. The retaliation came quiet and pretty. A story about men who isolate you from your community and call it love. Another about financial control, a word big enough to stick even if no one knew what it meant. A few people pulled me aside, voices gentle, asking if everything was okay at home. I said yes and no, because both were true depending on which room you meant. Then I told 2 friends the whole thing in one piece, beginning to whatever this was now, without softening the edges to protect her image. Saying it out loud made it obvious I hadn't imagined any of it. They listened and didn't try to fix it. They just stayed. It was the first time in months I felt like I wasn't staging my life for an audience that wanted blood. She called late from an unknown number and said she was outside and scared. Every muscle in me fired. I went to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw her angled perfectly under the streetlight, phone in hand, face tilted to catch tears. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't. The answer I could trust was simple. If I opened that door, I was back inside the machine. I texted a ride code to a safe address and didn't unlatch the chain. She posted a black square about being left in the street. I lay awake longer than I wanted to and still knew I'd chosen right. The next morning I made coffee and put my phone in a drawer and wrote a sentence on a sticky note: "I don't have to explain my no." I stuck it where my tired eyes would land. She sent a playlist called Us, built from songs I'd shown her months ago like they were gifts. I didn't press play. She dropped off a box with a watch, "So you're not late this time." I wrote "refused" on the label and handed it back to the courier. That night she posted about men who can't receive generosity. I laughed, not bitter, free. The smallest win surprised me. I went half a day without thinking about her, noticed it, and didn't punish myself by looking. I fixed the squeaky hinge that had been driving me crazy, but I'd ignored because filming it would have been a whole thing. I ate dinner at a table and let it be bland and good. My friends stopped asking if I was okay and started saying, "You sound like you again." I slept through the night and woke up without bracing for a grenade in my notifications. Boring details. The kind you can build a life on. By the end of that stretch, I understood something I kept missing when I tried to be clever. She wasn't confused. She was consistent. Kindness when I pulled away. Cruelty when I got close. An audience in between to keep me working for applause. I couldn't negotiate with it, fix it, or outperform it. I could only stop feeding it. That's where I was when this chapter closed, not triumphant, not healed, but finally still long enough to hear my own thoughts without her voice playing over them. She didn't disappear just because I drew a line. If anything, she doubled down. Silence wasn't her style. She needed movement, attention, sparks, even if she had to start the fire herself. A week after I refused her reset trip, the new phase began. It started with nostalgia bait. Old photos resurfaced on her feed, us at dinner, my hand barely in frame, her captioned, "Some things are too good to lose." People commented hearts, tagged me, sent me screenshots. I didn't reply. She followed with a story where she cried just enough to look raw, talking about men who ghost when you need them most. Mutuals messaged me, soft voices asking if I'd really abandoned her. I said, "We broke up." That wasn't dramatic enough for them. They wanted spectacle. She knew it. That's why she staged it that way. The next round was pity in person. She waited outside my building, makeup smudged, hoodie too big, phone angled just so. She said she couldn't sleep, that she just wanted to talk. For a split second my chest betrayed me, old reflex telling me to protect. Then I remembered the peephole moment, the way her tears caught the streetlight like stage lighting. I told her calmly, "You need help, but not from me." Her eyes hardened, then softened again like she was shifting roles. Later that night, I saw the post, "Some men abandon you when you're already broken." I put my phone face down and let the quiet stand. Reputation was always her sharpest knife. She started dropping words like controlling and unstable into conversations with mutuals. You don't need proof with words like that. They stick, even if people don't fully believe them. For a while, I walked into rooms already guilty in stories I hadn't heard yet. But after enough time, people started noticing the script was recycled. Charisma wins early. Consistency wins late. Slowly, the fog thinned. The breaking point came at a party I couldn't skip. She walked in late, glowing, loud, dragging eyes with her like always. She told stories about toxic men and fragile egos and paused just long enough for everyone to glance my way. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I sat with the host's dog, scratched behind its ears, and joked about trading lives. People laughed. She didn't. Her eyes narrowed, like she realized I'd stepped off the stage for good. And that's when I understood something. Without me playing along, her lines were just noise. After that, her efforts got desperate. Burner accounts messaging me, "You'll never do better," or "She's glowing now without you." Packages arrived, one with a book about forgiveness, another with a watch and the note, "So you're not late this time." I refused delivery. She posted that men can't even accept kindness. For the first time, I laughed, not bitter, just free. Meanwhile, my life was filling in. I fixed a squeaky hinge. I cooked a meal too salty and still ate it at the table like it mattered. I met friends without editing my stories to avoid triggering her. They told me, "You sound like yourself again." That hit harder than any insult she'd thrown. By the end of it, I realized she wasn't lost, complicated, or misunderstood. She was consistent. Sweet when I pulled away. Cruel when I got close. An audience in between to keep me working for applause. It had never been confusion. It was design. And the only winning move was to stop playing. She didn't just fade out of my life after the party where she realized her script didn't work on me anymore. She shifted gears, like a director who refuses to end the show. And I swear, for a while, I wondered if I'd ever truly be free of her. Because even when she wasn't around, her fingerprints were on everything. The first sign was the rumors. Out of nowhere, people I hadn't spoken to in months started checking in on me. One coworker asked if I was okay after what happened at home. I blinked. At home? There was nothing at home but silence and a half-dead plant. Later I found out she'd been telling anyone who would listen that I had anger issues, that she left me because she feared for her safety. The words were poisonous, not because they were true, but because they didn't have to be. Once you plant the seed, people don't forget it. And she knew that. At first, I wanted to clear my name, to send screenshots and timestamps, to build a case like a lawyer. But then I realized that's what she wanted, for me to keep playing defense in a game she invented. I stopped explaining. When someone asked, I just said, "That's not what happened," and walked away. Some believed me. Some didn't. But for the first time, it didn't feel like my job to convince them. She tried another tactic, gifts disguised as olive branches. A package showed up with expensive cologne and a note, "Thought of you. Don't waste it." I left it sealed and dropped it off a donation. A week later another package came, this time my old hoodie, folded neatly, smelling like her perfume. She knew exactly what she was doing. Nostalgia is a dangerous drug. I almost kept it. Almost. But I walked it straight to the dumpster and didn't look back. That night she posted, "Some people throw away pieces of love." I laughed in my kitchen and for once, it wasn't bitter. It was relief. But the hardest part wasn't her games. It was my body catching up to the fact that she was gone. Every buzz of my phone still made my shoulders tighten. Walking into places we used to go felt like bracing for a punch that never came. Even silence felt loaded, like she might break it at any moment. Healing wasn't just ignoring her, it was unlearning her. So I started filling my days with small, boring things. I fixed the leaky faucet I'd ignored for months. I cooked real meals and actually ate them at the table instead of scrolling through my phone. I went back to the gym, not to prove anything, just to move my body and feel like it belonged to me again. One night, I walked home from work and realized I'd gone the whole day without thinking of her once. It hit me so hard I had to stop on the sidewalk and breathe. Not because I was sad. Because I felt free. She didn't like that freedom. I could tell because the desperation in her attempts grew louder. Burner accounts started following me, sending messages like, "She's happier now without you," or "Everyone knows what you did." I blocked them all. Friends told me she was still talking, still spinning new stories. I shrugged. Let her. The show could go on without me in the cast. The final test came at another mutual gathering. She arrived late, as always, glowing, dragging eyes across the room. She started telling some dramatic story about men who can't handle powerful women, her gaze flicking to me every few sentences. Everyone looked at me, waiting for fireworks. I just kept talking to the host about his new couch, asked him where he got it, if it came in other colors. She tried twice more to bait me, pausing for a reaction. I didn't give her one. Eventually, she gave up and left early, no big exit, no applause. Just a quiet door shut behind her. That was the night I knew I'd won, not by fighting, not by proving, but by refusing to play. I walked home lighter than I'd felt in months. When I got there, I made tea, sat in the quiet, and didn't check my phone. For the first time, silence didn't feel like waiting for her. It felt like mine. And that's when I understood, freedom isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or fireworks. It's a small, steady thing, fixing a hinge, cooking a meal, laughing with friends, sleeping through the night. It's realizing the villain only has power as long as you keep showing out for the performance. And I was done performing. I thought the finale would be fireworks or a scene with a perfect closing line, but the truth is endings don't perform for you. They just arrive and wait to see if you recognize them. Mine showed up on a Tuesday morning when I poured coffee and realized I hadn't checked my phone yet. No vibration phantom, no itch to see if she'd launched another flare into the sky. I stood there listening to the kettle click as it cooled and felt something I hadn't felt in a year, nothing tugging me backward. It wasn't joy. It wasn't revenge. It was the quiet you get when the storm finally forgets your address. She tried to drag me back one last time, because that's her religion, never letting the curtain fall. A letter arrived with my name written in the same looping script she used to sign notes on napkins. Inside were printed photos of us, each with a message on the back like a museum placard. When you loved me. When you started to pull away. When you stopped pretending. It was supposed to sting. It made me tired. I made tea, looked at each picture once, and noticed something my brain hadn't let me see while I was in it. In almost every shot where she looked electric, I looked half-lit, shoulders tight, smile late, eyes doing the math of some test I hadn't studied for. I slid the photos back in the envelope and put them under the stack of boring grown-up papers that actually govern a life, leases, receipts, a manual for the dishwasher I still haven't fully figured out. That's where they belong, not as a shrine on the fridge, not as a bonfire in the sink, just as part of the paperwork of being done. The smear smoke thinned on its own. You can only tell the same dramatic story so many times before people need a new episode. A couple of mutuals circled back to say they'd heard another side. I said I hope they learned to ask for 3. One friend apologized for believing her first. I told him charisma wins the sprint, consistency wins the marathon. I didn't hand out proof. I didn't deliver a closing argument. I stopped auditioning for credibility in a room she was directing. The strangest relief was realizing I didn't want vindication anymore. I wanted groceries in my bag and a walk home where the only plot line was whether the sky would hold. All the healing cliches I used to roll my eyes at ended up being exactly right, but quieter than the motivational posters make them sound. I fixed the cabinet door that had been loose since we started. I cooked things that required more than one pan and ate them sitting down. I answered texts when I could and didn't apologize when I couldn't. I met my brother for a stupid errand and we spent 20 minutes arguing about which batteries to buy like it mattered, and somehow that mattered more than anything I'd said to a camera in months. I went to the gym and put my phone in the locker and learned my body kept records my mind tried to edit. I slept all the way through. I woke up before my alarm and didn't flinch. There were echoes, sure. A song hit the opening notes and I was back in her passenger seat for a breath. A smell in a stairwell took me to a night where she laughed too loud for strangers and hissed that I was dull before our elevator hit the lobby. A stranger tilted her head the same way and for a second my stomach prepared for impact. The difference now was I didn't treat those flashes like omens. They were weather, passing, not commands. I let them move through the room and out the window and didn't chase them with meaning. We crossed paths once by accident, the grown-up kind of accident where you can't accuse the universe of plotting. She was with a new man, new to me, anyway. She talked with her hands, cutting shapes out of the air, and he leaned in like he was trying to keep up. For a blink the old reflex lifted its head. Fix your posture. Adjust your face. Prepare for a test you won't be told you're taking. Then it sank back down because there was no test. She looked at me the way a performer looks at someone who won't clap on cue. I gave the smallest nod a human can give and kept walking. Half a block later I realized my pulse had stayed steady the whole time. I didn't feel brave. I felt unhooked. The last trap she set came wrapped as maturity. An email with the subject closure, carefully punctuated, full of therapeutic vocabulary about cycles and our growth edges and honoring the story. Old me would have highlighted sentences and built responses. New me read to the end and asked a single question out loud in my kitchen: what am I trying to get from this that I can't give myself? The answer was nothing I wanted anymore. I wrote back, I wish you well, and archived the thread. It wasn't cold. It was clean. People kept asking what I'd do next time, as if the point of a mess is to upgrade your choreography. I don't have a strategy. I have small rules I can keep even on tired days. I don't date an audience. I don't let a joke punch down and call it honesty. I don't mistake adrenaline for intimacy. I don't defend my boundaries like a controversial opinion piece. I don't perform calm to keep someone from leaving. If calm is a performance, it's not calm. And when my body says no while my brain writes essays to argue with it, I trust the part that doesn't know how to lie. I started seeing someone without making her the sequel to a disaster. It wasn't cinematic. Coffee that wasn't a prop, a walk that didn't need a caption, a conversation where I didn't count my pauses. We talked about nothing: trains running late, a neighbor's ridiculous dog, a book she loved that I might not. When I told a story, I didn't angle it to carry a lesson about me. When she laughed, it landed like rain on a roof I'd fixed myself. I didn't dump the archive of pain in her lap so she could grade it. I offered pieces when they were actually necessary, and otherwise we just lived like exactly what we were: two people having a Tuesday without an audience. We said goodnight like normal humans and I slept. That alone felt like proof I'd left the old building and locked the door behind me. The hardest apology I had to make was to myself. Not the dramatic kind, no mirror speeches, no vows under a streetlight. Just a quiet recognition that I stayed long after I knew better, because the highs were engineered to drown out the lows, and because being the calm one had become a costume I used to hide the fact that I was disappearing. I forgave the part of me that thought love was a test I could ace if I stopped taking up space. Then I promised him, me, that I'd take up the same space in my own life that I offered everyone else. Not bigger than necessary. Just not smaller than true. I won't pretend there was no anger left. There was, for a while, a low hum that wanted a courtroom and a verdict and a crowd to hear the sentence. It faded the way batteries fade in a toy that finally gets put back on the shelf. The more I lived in rooms where the only stakes were dinner and sleep and a text returned when it made sense, the more the machine rusted. The day I realized I hadn't rehearsed a speech in a week, I laughed at how much square footage those speeches used to take up in my head. If grief is love with nowhere to go, then whatever I felt for her had finally found the exit it deserved: out, into the air, where it could stop pretending to be a project. The truth I wish I'd learned earlier is simple: peace isn't a prize for surviving chaos. It's a habit you can build if you stop feeding the part of your life that demands a villain. My mornings are the proof. I wake up and there's no performance review waiting on my phone. I make coffee and drink it hot. I open a window because I want air, not applause. I answer what needs answering and let the rest wait without guilt. I buy boring groceries and cook edible food and laugh when I ruin the rice because nothing is filming me. I text friends dumb memes and show up when they move apartments and complain about stairs together. I walk home at night and pass lit windows and feel a kind of soft envy that isn't hunger, it's a wish for ordinary that I finally get to keep. If you need a last line, it's not going to be clever. It's just this: I stopped letting someone else's chaos decide the shape of my days. She can keep the stage. I meant it when I said I wish her well, from far away, where her weather doesn't reach. I don't need the last word. I need my life to sound like itself. And now, when the kettle clicks and the apartment settles and the day starts without a rehearsal, I hear it. It's not loud. It's not fancy. It's mine.